think the boys need glasses. And honestly, I probably should have gotten their eyes checked a lot sooner if you guys have been following along with their yearly updates. Starting at around 4 years old, they started to take the standard eye exam test at their wellness visits. And so for the last few years, their 4-year checkup, their 5-year checkup, their 6-year checkup, and even once they started public school, they started taking the standard eye exam test once a year at school. Whenever they took this eye exam test, it showed that something was off. At first, I thought maybe they just didn't understand what was being asked of them. At 4 years old, I feel like it's a lot to ask a 4-year-old to stand still on a line, look down a hallway, read off of a chart, cover one eye, cover the other. I thought maybe they just didn't understand what was being asked of them. I thought also maybe they just didn't know their letters yet to do like letter recognition. So we did try a chart with shapes. However, their reading was off. The following year, I thought maybe they were just distracting one another. We always did their wellness visits back to back, so they were always together. So I thought maybe they're just distracted in this process, and that is why the reading is off. And then I thought to myself, okay, maybe this is just something we'll keep an eye on. However, after this last year's wellness visit, when they took this eye exam again, and it showed that something was off, I thought, okay, maybe it's time to get them seen by a pediatric ophthalmologist. And that is where the hard part started. Finding a doctor for your kids is already stressful enough, but adding in the factors of finding a doctor in your area, finding a doctor that takes your insurance, finding a doctor that has availability, and in my case, availability back to back, since I'm always taking the boys to their appointments together. I need 2 appointments back to back. And then also just finding one that is taking new patients in general. That felt like a whole project in and of itself. And so today's video is sponsored by Zocdoc. I'm going to share with you guys how I finally got the boys' eye exam scheduled, what made it so frustrating in the beginning, and then how using Zocdoc helped to streamline that process and help me finally get their eye exam scheduled. Okay, I just got in from dropping the boys off and I got Lily settled with a snack, and we're going to rewind a little bit and I'm going to set the scene for you guys on this entire journey. So let's start from the beginning. For the last few years, when the boys did their eye exams at their yearly wellness visits, it showed something was off with their visual acuity. Nothing dramatic happened. There was no emergency. It wasn't like they woke up one day and told me that they couldn't see. I didn't even really see anything that raised red flags or sounded the alarm bells. It's not like I saw them squinting at the TV. Their teachers didn't tell me that they were having trouble seeing the board. It was something that was a little bit more gradual. At their 4-year checkup, they did the vision screening test, and both of them scored the exact same, and both of their scores showed that something was off. And for me, I thought maybe they just didn't understand what was being asked of them. I mean, they were 4 years old, they're wiggly, they don't really follow directions at that age. It was kind of a lot to ask of them to have them stand on a line, look down the hallway, and read the vision exam. And so I didn't immediately panic when the pediatrician told me, hey, their scores show that maybe something is off with their vision. I thought to myself, let's just keep an eye on this and it'll be kind of like a wait and see kind of thing. And so the following year at their 5-year wellness checkup, the same thing happened. They were asked to perform the vision exam and both of them had the same exact score, and both of their scores showed that something was off. And so again, in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, were they distracted? Did they understand the directions that were being asked of them? I remember at this appointment specifically, Ben kept going out in the hall during Jack's exam and whispering the wrong answer in his ear. So I thought, whatever we're doing here, I don't think that this is an accurate representation of their vision. Same thing at home. I wasn't seeing them squint. I wasn't seeing them have a hard time see the TV. Their teachers weren't saying anything in the school setting. And so again, I thought to myself, I don't think this is an accurate representation of their vision, but again, we will keep an eye on it. And during this time, they were in public school. They started preschool through our public school district, and they also perform eye exams every year in public school. And so the school did call me and tell me that both of them scored the same exact score, and both of them showed a little bit of a deficit in their visual acuity. They asked me if the pediatrician had brought this to my attention, and I did say yes, but again, reassured them that I didn't know if it was an accurate representation of their visit. I would keep an eye on it, and I did have in the back of my mind wanting to make an appointment for them. I tried to go through this process prior to that, but Lily was little and there was just a lot going on. So I thought to myself, I'm gonna wait and see. I'm gonna see if they start telling me that they're having a hard time seeing anything, and I'm also going to wait and see what happens the following year. I think a lot of parents can relate to this. Sometimes with kids, it's hard to know if something is a real concern or if it's just kids being kids, and that is how I felt in this position. However, this past year at their 6-year wellness visit, it was the same story. Both of them scored the same exact score, and both of them were showing that something was off with their visual acuity. And so at this point, I knew I needed to schedule an appointment with a pediatric ophthalmologist. I could no longer push this off. For my sake and for the kids' sake, I really needed to get their eyes checked. And even though I knew I had to get this appointment scheduled, being a mom of 3 kids, twins, school-aged, their ever-changing schedules. Lily, if you guys have been following along, I've been dealing a lot with her low tone and her gross motor delays, and so I kind of was like tunnel visioned on getting Lily the help she needed. And again, because it wasn't a concern in the household, the boys weren't complaining that they were having a hard time seeing. It's not that I didn't care and I didn't want them to get their eyes checked. There was just so much else going on around me that I had it on my to-do list. I had it in mind that it's something that had to get done this year. And lo and behold, it's already the end of June and I'm just getting around to getting their eye exams scheduled. If you're a parent, again, I'm sure you can relate with this. Sometimes the hardest part of this whole thing is just getting that appointment scheduled. It's not so much about taking your kids to that appointment, it's just getting there and getting that appointment scheduled. That could be the hardest thing with the ever-growing to-do list, the ever-changing schedules, new pickup times, new drop-off times, sports. Again, dealing with Lily, if you have more than 1 kid, I'm sure you know the mental load. Your mind is twisting and turning at 100 miles a minute. And so sometimes, most of the time, the hardest part is just sitting down and getting that appointment scheduled. There's also so many moving parts to scheduling a new specialist appointment. First of all, finding a doctor in your area, finding a doctor that takes your insurance, finding a doctor that is accepting new patients, multiple new patients in my case, finding the availability in your ever-changing schedule, your kid's schedule. I also have the added layer of having to always find 2 appointments back to back because I do take the boys to their appointments together. So all of this combined, it just kept slowing me down. So once I finally said to myself, okay, it is time to get this appointment scheduled, I thought the next steps would be simple. So the next step, find a pediatric ophthalmologist and find one that takes our insurance and then book the appointment. Easy. But that is not how I felt in the slightest. The first thing I tried to do was find a pediatric ophthalmologist in network, someone that took our insurance in our area. So I just decided to head over to our insurance's website. That seemed like the easiest course of action. And I tried to do some research on there. Most insurances have these directories online and they seem simple enough. However, most times they are so confusing and hard to navigate. And even sometimes I find that they're not up to date with providers that are actually currently taking your insurance. So I went on there, I typed in pediatric ophthalmologist, basically just an eye doctor that specializes in little kids. I wanted one that specialized in kids specifically, and a long list of names popped up, which can be so overwhelming. Sometimes though, the list that they spit out is not tailored to your exact needs and what you're looking for. Are they a network for my specific insurance plan? Are they accepting new patients? Do they have experience with kids? Do they have 2 appointments back to back? And do they have availability soon? Because I knew I could no longer keep pushing this off. It was something that I wanted to get done by the end of the month. So as I was scrolling through this list of doctors, I would come across one that I thought, okay, maybe this doctor could work for me. I would click on their name and the information was outdated. Sometimes they would list just the doctor's name and an office, but again, it was not the most current office, or the office wasn't as close as I would like it to be. I didn't want something that I was driving more than 20-ish minutes for, because taking kids anywhere in the car for long periods of time, that just adds to my stress. I wanted someone nice and close to me. I also feel like it's hard to get a read on them. I love to research doctors' names and read reviews and get firsthand experiences. These insurance-driven directories don't really do that. So I felt like I would have to look on one thing, hop over to a new tab, research, look at something else to really try and get the full picture for myself. I feel like finding a doctor for your kids specifically, things like that matter. The firsthand experience of other parents, how was the atmosphere in their office, what were the parent reviews, all that kind of stuff. I really like to make sure I'm doing my due diligence as a parent. I never want to take my kids to a doctor that winds up being scary or intimidating or short. I wanted someone who was going to be warm to my kids and not only walk me through the process as a mom, but also help my kids understand what they were doing and what they were going to be looking at. So once I dwindled down a list of doctors who were contenders for me for seeing the boys, I then had to start the whole calling thing, which I feel like is such a new generation thing, but anything that has to do with a phone call, I do kind of procrastinate with. But on top of that, making phone calls with my kids around, it adds an additional layer of distraction to it. And I hate phone tag, where I would call these offices to try and get information about the doctor, their availability, their schedule, their office, and I would get an automated voice messaging system. I would leave a message, they would try and call me back, and then that just wasn't a good time for me to receive a call back. And so it would just lead to, again, putting off the appointment, making it more difficult than it had to be. I hate phone tag. If you're a mom or a parent, I'm sure you know how it goes. For me, the best time to make phone calls is when Lily is down for a nap, and a lot of the times in these offices, doctors are typically out for their lunch. So it would just lead to, again, a never-ending game of phone tag. And so something that should have taken 5, 10, 15 minutes, adding in all these various layers, it drags out the process and makes it so much harder than it needs to be. Once I did get through to a few of the doctors that were on my list, it again is then a game of 20 questions. Do you take my insurance? Are you accepting new patients? Do you see children? Do you have 2 appointments back to back? I was not going to drive one of the boys there for an eye exam, then have to leave and go back on a different day. I also knew that this eye exam was going to take some time because the few offices that I did speak to told me that first appointment eye exams can take up to 2 hours because they need to dilate your children's eyes. So I knew it was going to be a long appointment. I knew I didn't want to have to go back on a different day. So I had to ask all those questions and try and find a time that not only worked in their schedule, but worked in my schedule and the boys' schedule since they already started camp. So all of this, it just made this whole process so frustrating because, I mean, I am in part to blame for this. It is something that I did put off for quite some time, and so now I have it set in my mind. For me, I'm the type of person that, like, once I have something in my mind and a goal set for myself or a to-do set for myself, I must complete it. However, it just became so frustrating to try and make this appointment with all these moving parts. I was trying to do the responsible thing. I was trying to make my boys their appointment to finally get their eyes checked. I knew I wanted to get it done. I mean, for me, I knew I wanted to get it done by the end of June, but I thought, like, especially before going into the 1st grade and for their next wellness visit, I didn't want to be the kind of parent that they're like, why do you keep putting this off? So I wanted to really get this done. And so it was just so frustrating that I had the goal in my mind now, and it just wasn't as simple as it seemed it was going to be laid out in front of me. I mean, for me, it was already like 6 months since their last visit, and every time I tried to schedule an appointment and it didn't go how I wanted to go, it was like, okay, I will tackle it tomorrow. I will get to it tomorrow. But as a parent, I'm sure you know, tomorrow turns into next week, which turns into next month, which then turns into 6 months later. And so I remember thinking there has to be an easier way for this. There has to be something out there that has streamlined this process and made booking these appointments so much easier. And that's when I remembered Zocdoc. Throughout my searches of all these doctors, anytime I typed a doctor's name in, Zocdoc was one of the search results that would come up. And after seeing it time and time again, I thought to myself, I'm going to try this out and let's see if this actually is the thing that helps me get this appointment booked. Now, if you're unfamiliar with who Zocdoc is, they are a free app or a website that helps you book appointments. So for me as a busy mom, Zocdoc was great because it actually helped to streamline the searching process. Once you enter in just a few key points of information, it spits out a bunch of results, but each result has all of the critical information that you're looking for right in front of you. So again, in my case, I needed a pediatric ophthalmologist. So once I got onto the Zocdoc website, it asked you what specialty of doctor you're looking for. I put in pediatric ophthalmologist. It asks you for your location, and you can toggle between like different mile radiuses. I wanted something pretty close to home, so I put in a location close to home. And they also asked for your insurance, so I was able to go through and search for our insurance, and then I was able to hit search and start my search over there. So instead of going through like a long directory on my insurance website, I was actually able to go through this list that Zocdoc provided and start comparing doctors right then and there without having to toggle between a bunch of different tabs on my computer. I could look at the doctor, I could look at their qualifications, I could look at patient reviews, which again, as a parent, to me is so critical. I love like reading firsthand experience of other parents and patients out there. So I was able to read those reviews right then and there and start comparing. I could also check appointment availability and it laid out like daily schedules as well as weekly schedules, so you can get a broad picture of the provider's availability, and then you can go ahead and cross-check that with your calendar right then and there. With Zocdoc, I no longer needed to go ahead and start calling a bunch of offices to check their availability to see if they had the 2 back-to-back appointments that we needed on a date and time that worked with me. I could just scroll down of the different providers that kind of popped out to me and check their schedule and see if it worked with mine. I could take my time, I could compare options. I didn't feel like I was on the phone with someone and in an awkward position to jump in and make a decision right then and there. I was able to go back to it if I had to leave it to help Lily or something like that. I felt like it took that added weight and stress off of me to have the information available to me in my terms, instead of having to do the whole phone tag thing, talking to someone, dealing with customer service, which isn't always the best when you're dealing with like receptionists in doctor's office. I feel like sometimes their time is just as valuable as yours, and so it could get a little dicey if you're trying to make a decision and you're taking a little bit longer. I was able to take a deep breath, look at the information that was in front of me, and make the decision on my own time. I also like that Zocdoc helped make the process feel a lot more modern. I no longer had to rely on these phone calls. You can actually go ahead and schedule the appointments right then and there, all online at your fingertips. So it takes that layer of a phone call out of it. I think it definitely helps people in my generation. We like things that are quick and easy and online. So I like that it made the process feel a lot more modern. Overall, it just made the process a lot less overwhelming, and I was able to finally find the provider that felt like the right match for us and go ahead and schedule the boys' appointment. And so what essentially took me months to do, Zocdoc helped me do within, I think, like 24 hours. I was able to finally find a provider that I felt comfortable with, who had availability, who worked around the boys' schedule, and we actually went to them yesterday, and it was a great experience. Like I said, I rely heavily on reviews. This office was definitely tailored to kids. They had a lot of cute things out in the waiting room. Like I said, they had to get their eyes dilated. So we did have to kill about 30 minutes out in the waiting room. We actually walked down the in the shopping center and got to Dunkin' Donuts and then came back, and they had a big fish tank in the front. So that definitely helped kill the time and keep Lily entertained as well as the boys entertained while we waited for their eyes to dilate. And so through all of this, it was a 2-hour appointment. We were able to go and get all of this accomplished, and I am glad to say that the boys don't need glasses. Through the extensive tests that the pediatric ophthalmologist does in their office, and with speaking with me, they did feel like all of the past exams that they did, it probably was more so that they weren't understanding the test, or they were put on the spot, and they were just like answering and saying whatever letter they saw in front of them, even if it wasn't the letter that was in front of them. They were able to check a broad range of things that the normal eye screening exam doesn't check. And through all of this, she did tell me she did not feel that they need glasses. They both do have an astigmatism, which is like the shape of their eye is a little bit more oval than round. That's how she explained it to me. She said it's something that we can keep an eye on, and now that we are already patients in their system, it'll be so easy to do checkup appointments yearly with them, and I can go back to our pediatrician next year and tell them we did get them seen. There is nothing wrong with their visual acuity in terms of them needing glasses, and I can pat myself on the back as a mom and finally check this off my list, not only for myself, but for the boys. So as parents, I know we all can relate. When something needs to be done, like scheduling a doctor's appointment, we can feel stuck in a position when that task feels overwhelming and hard to complete. That was the biggest lesson for me. You know, I'm probably not alone in having trouble making these appointments or finding a task like this to be complicated. I'm sure any parent out there or caregiver can relate to me on some level of this process, whether that is it's difficult for you to find doctors that take your insurance, if it's difficult to find doctors that work with your schedule, if it's difficult to find doctors in a specialty in your area. I'm sure any of you, even for yourself, can relate that this process can seem overwhelming and is most of the times more complicated than it needs to be. And if you've ever felt that way, I highly recommend you guys checking out Zocdoc for your next doctor's appointment scheduling process, because I promise you it makes it so much more easy. And I'm so grateful for Zocdoc. They are providing me with a link that I will leave in the description box down below. I will also put it up on the screen right here. So if you're finding yourself in a position similar to mine where you need to schedule a doctor's appointment, it could be an eye doctor, it could be a dentist, it could be a dermatologist, They have a wide range of specialties over on their website. I will leave the link to Zocdoc down below so that you guys can go ahead and click through that and start your search. As a parent, we don't need another thing on our plate. In fact, we need things that make things on our plate a lot easier, and Zocdoc is one of those things. So again, I will leave the link down below. Thank you to Zocdoc for sponsoring today's video. I am proud to say that I got this done, check this off my list, and the boys don't need glasses. So that is it for today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed hearing the complicated story of what led me here and how we were able to get the boys' eyes checked. And with that being said, I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye guys.